Hey, good afternoon, everyone. And I want to welcome everyone to session E4. This is our CTP Ensemble. My name is Mark Pearson, and I'm going to serve as the moderator for this session. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm glad everyone is joining us. Before we get started, I want to make sure everyone knows that we've got a great session ahead, and I want to encourage everyone as we get the presentations rolling to go ahead and start entering their questions in the Slido. But before we get to the presentations, I want to introduce our session sponsor with a brief video, and that is Freeze and Nichols. So I want to play this video real quick and introduce them as our sponsor.
Consultants, multidiscipline, we build buildings, parks, airports, railroads, anything out there, we do it.
We build cities, and we're not just looking at our field, but we have the expertise of people that understand the legislative side and the policy side and all the different components.
We get hired to solve our clients' problems. So as a company, we need to be innovative in the solutions that we come up with.
We have all of those leaders and designers within one company to provide that full project. So you could get the full design without needing to go outside of Freeze and Nichols. We can do all of that work within our company.
When someone hires Freeze and Nichols, what can they expect? One, that they have a long-term partner. We're invested in their best interest.
We always choose to do what's right. Sometimes it's not the most profitable, but I've always been really impressed with our team and our leadership just doing what's best and what's right for the client or our environment or our people.
Again, I want to thank Freeze and Nichols. You know, that's one of the great things I love about our profession in this conference is that, you know, I know so many of those folks, and I know many of you probably do as well. And it's actually been really fun to watch a lot of the videos because it's fun to see everyone. And obviously, not being in person, that's you know, hopefully it's at least fun to be able to see everyone through those videos. So thanks again for that, Freeze and Nichols. And thanks for sponsoring this. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Again, as I mentioned, as you're watching these videos, and we've got 3 great videos ahead of us, absolutely go ahead and start entering your questions in the Slido part of the screen, so that you know we can go ahead and start getting those queued up and ready for when we have the sessions. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first session speaker, and that's Mr. Jerry Snead, and he's with the North Carolina Department of Transportation, actually within their Highway Floodplain Program. His presentation is called "Better Together: The Value of a State CTP and Interagency Partnership." So we'll turn it over to the video, and then we'll have a Q&A session just a little bit.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jerry Snead. I'm the engineering supervisor with the Highway Floodplain Program in the North Carolina Department of Transportation. And I want to thank ASFPM for the opportunity to share with you about the interagency partnership that we have at North Carolina Department of Transportation with our sister agency, the Department of Public Safety, Emergency Management, and particularly with their North Carolina Floodplain Mapping Program, which is under their risk management section. By way of background, in 1999, Hurricane Floyd flooded thousands of square miles of eastern North Carolina and left thousands of people homeless. This disaster highlighted our state's vulnerability to natural disasters and the need for accurate and up-to-date floodplain maps. In 2000, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, designated North Carolina a cooperating technical partner state, formalizing an agreement between FEMA and the state to modernize flood maps. Now, this partnership resulted in the creation of the North Carolina Floodplain Mapping Program, NCFMP. With the designation as a cooperating technical partner state with FEMA, the state assumed primary ownership and responsibility of the flood insurance rate maps for all North Carolina communities as part of the National Flood Insurance Program. This program is responsible for conducting flood hazard analyses and producing updated digital flood insurance rate maps. These and much other flood risk information are available on the NC Flood Risk Information System website shown here. Now, nearly 85% of the streams in North Carolina are in FEMA regulated mapped special flood hazard areas. Given that NCDOT is the largest developer in the state, the burden of NFIP compliance is considerable. This is a depiction of numerous projects that NCDOT is working on through our State Transportation Improvement Program. Prior to 2006, NCDOT became aware of our need to significantly improve our floodplain management efforts. In August 2006, Federal Highway Administration, FEMA, and the North Carolina Floodplain Mapping Program representatives met with NCDOT hydraulics unit staff to discuss floodplain management concerns. The Federal Highway Administration emphasized that federal aid projects are required to be in compliance with Federal Highway Administration regulations, which are consistent with the National Flood Insurance Program regulations as outlined in a 1982 Memorandum of Understanding between FEMA and FHWA titled Procedures for Coordinating Highway Encroachments of Floodplains with FEMA, later codified in a supplement to the Federal Aid Policy Guide under 23 CFR 650A, entitled Location and Hydraulic Design of Encroachments on Floodplains. Further, this policy is reinforced by both federal and state executive orders and affirmed in the commitment by the highway administrator at that time to ensure NFIP compliance. Title 44 CFR parts 59 through 70 contain the code of federal regulations that define the NFIP. All NCDOT projects that involve any stream crossing or encroachment on a special flood hazard area must comply with NFIP regulations. All development, including adding, changing, replacing, or removing any structure on a FEMA regulated stream, must be documented and receive approval through an NFIP compliance review by a qualified engineer vetted by NCFMP. When a map revision is required, the appropriate protocol to be used is based on the nature and the magnitude of the changes in the base flood elevation, BFE, when comparing site conditions between the proposed and existing drainage structures at stream crossings. Now, besides stream crossings, project impacts can be due to other encroachments such as road widening, rest areas, stormwater best management practices, etc., which are within FEMA floodways or non-encroachment areas. The majority of NCDOT projects on FEMA regulated streams result in minor impacts that do not require a formal letter of map revision, LOMAR. NCDOT entered into a memorandum of agreement in 2008 with NCFMP to streamline FEMA NFIP compliance approvals for projects with no rise or minor decreases in the base flood elevation, and to ensure flood maps and studies are updated statewide, reflecting changes by NCDOT, the state's largest developer. Since its inception in 2008, this MOA has undergone a few revisions and updates, most recently at the end of 2020. Originally, the MOA was between NCDOT and NCFMP primarily to serve the purpose of updates to flood maps. However, with the mutual success to both agencies, the scope of the latest version of the MOA was expanded to be between the entire Department of Public Safety Emergency Management section not just FMP and NCDOT, officially recognizing the establishment in 2017 of NCDOT's Highway Floodplain Program, which is committed to coordination with NC Emergency Management to facilitate FEMA approvals for NCDOT projects, mutual sharing of FEMA-related technical data between NCDOT and emergency management, and collaboration for resilient design, as well as emergency preparedness and response efforts with regard to extreme weather events, and to mutually support the common interests and responsibilities set forth in the stated mission and goals of both agencies. The MOA is implemented through monthly coordination meetings where projects are presented and any floodplain management issues or concerns can be discussed and resolved. We've had over 2,000 projects approved through the MOA in just the past 12 years. Projects are submitted to NCFMP via a completely digital process for comments, responses, and approvals. Benefits this MOA provides for NCDOT are having a one-stop shop for FEMA reviews, rather than having to coordinate individually with up to 650 different communities statewide, which provides efficiency and consistency. And NCFMP is our liaison with FEMA and with the individual communities when any floodplain management concerns may arise. Our ongoing coordination with NCFMP ensures project delivery processes move forward on schedule without delay. The projects with minor impacts, for those, approval time is cut by approximately 75% compared to those that require a conditional letter of map revision approval, which can take up to a year, whereas the MOA approvals generally take under 3 months. The MOA is an agency-to-agency agreement that is dynamic and flexible in scope, and it ensures that NCDOT remains compliant with NFIP requirements. For NC Emergency Management, the MOA ensures that they are kept aware of changes to the base flood elevations and the special flood hazard areas for the largest floodplain developer in the state. It provides a funding source to help support the cost of flood map maintenance. It helps ensure that the flood insurance rate maps and the flood insurance study reports are kept as current and accurate as possible. We use the same effective hydraulic models that NCFMP developed, and we follow their hydraulic modeling standards to ensure consistency and avoid unnecessary rework, ensuring the quality of the technical data supporting the published effective flood maps. The structure of our interagency coordination also lessens the burden on individual communities with respect to floodplain management concerns. Some additional benefits include cross-training opportunities, such as 2D hydraulic modeling forums, HICRAS hydraulic modeling courses, etc. Through NCDOT's NEPA process, we typically can readily provide supporting documentation for Endangered Species Act compliance requirements that are needed for CLOMAR and LOMAR approvals. And both of our agencies employ private contractors, which assist with project development and FEMA NFIP compliance reviews, and that helps our state's economy. We also mutually benefit from sharing of data resources, including hydraulic models, as-built plans, survey data, and statewide LIDAR terrain data. We also are collaborating in development of emergency response and flood warning systems. More on that shortly. Both agencies participate in robust research programs, which provide mutual benefit. Overall, we've grown to appreciate the many benefits and value of our ongoing partnership and collaboration. I want to discuss 3 projects, which are a few examples of how the MOA has been applied successfully on NCDOT projects. The first one involved the reopening of a road to Honda Aircraft Company facility near the PTI airport in Guilford County in the Greensboro area. And this one was on the fast track. The proposed culvert caused a rise in the base flood elevation on Horsepen Creek. And it appeared that a conditional letter of map revision would be needed, but there was not enough time in the schedule for that. We were able to design this culvert to ensure that the base flood elevation rise would be contained within the DOT right-of-way. As such, it qualified for approval under the MOA within 1 month. In DuPont State Recreational Forest, traveling a very popular trail between Hooker Falls and High Falls required hikers to either ford the several foot deep, fast flowing little river or to climb stairs and cross a very busy road over guardrails on both sides that served as the main access to a large portion of the park. Due to the volume of traffic on the roadway, the route was becoming increasingly unsafe for hikers. As a solution, DSRF staff identified a location in the immediate vicinity of an existing ford that was being used, which would be suitable for a bridge to serve both hikers and horseback riders. This was a high priority project pushed by the governor at that time, and design needed to be completed in 6 months in time for a scheduled opening event. Although the bridge created an increase in the base flood elevation, the increase was contained within state-owned property and did not affect any insurable structures. So it qualified for approval via our MOA process and was able to be approved in about 1 month. Our MOA is also applicable for DOT-owned facilities other than highways. DOT needed to build a new building on the maintenance yard in Swain County, which would have been designated or been in a designated special flood hazard area. The effective hydraulic model used the downstream flow rate to calculate the 100-year water surface elevations upstream. A new flow change location was added in the model near the proposed building site location to obtain a more accurate flow rate at that location. Additionally, the 100-year flow was able to be contained in a closed pipe system through the proposed building site, significantly reducing the floodplain width, so the proposed building could be built outside the special flood hazard area. Thus, this project qualified for approval under our MOA. In addition to NCDOT bridge replacement and major roadway projects, the MOA also provides a mechanism for NFIP compliance with respect to routine maintenance operations activities as well as emergency response. As we've been reminded lately with Hurricanes Matthew and Florence, emergency response is a very important aspect of our collaboration with NC Emergency Management. The MOA allows for NCDOT to follow its published emergency response guidelines in the event of flood damage from extreme storm events, with appropriate follow-up afterward to provide NCFMP with supporting data for flood map and study updates as needed. NCDOT has also participated with NCFMP in developing mitigation strategies, flood studies in areas devastated by Hurricane Matthew as part of the governor's Rebuild NC program. Governor Cooper's Executive Order 80, signed in October 2018, asked cabinet agencies to produce a climate risk assessment and resiliency plan, which was completed in June of last year. A main component of the plan is consideration of scientific climate data and projections specific to North Carolina from which we can base decisions. There is a specific transportation chapter in which NCDOT outlined the problems we've experienced and what needs to be addressed in the future. Our collaboration with NC Emergency Management will be key in facilitating NCDOT's efforts to promote resiliency across our state transportation network and carrying out the objectives of new state policies that are being developed to reach these goals. An important tool that was developed by NC Emergency Management is the Flood Inundation Mapping Alert Network, FEMA, which provides rain and stage gauge data, flood inundation maps, flooding impacts, and alerts in real time to support risk-based decisions regarding flooding. Approximately 600 gauges are in the system, including stream and precipitation gauges. NC Emergency Management has over 150 gauges. The primary driver of FEMA is a great network of stream gauges. And with this in mind, DOT and Emergency Management are partnering and pooling available resources to increase and enhance our stream gauge coverage throughout the state. As we do so, we hope to be able to ultimately improve FEMA for more effective statewide coverage. Following Hurricane Florence, we realized it would be great to somehow utilize stream gauge monitoring in FEMA to intersect stream flood elevations with road elevations from the statewide LIDAR topographic data to determine which roads and bridges would be subject to inundation and how severely during an event. NCDOT contracted with ESP Associates to develop a transportation version of FEMA, which we call FEMA-T, specifically to assess NCDOT roadways, bridges, and other DOT assets in storm events. We launched a successful pilot version of FEMA-T, which covers streams in just the Neuse River Basin in 2019. And we plan to continue development to add the other river basins in the state to ultimately achieve full statewide coverage. One final thing I wanted to mention regarding our interagency collaboration is that in 2019, we took advantage of an interagency reimbursement agreement program at NCDOT. Through this program, we have now been able to staff 2 key positions within North Carolina Department of Public Safety for an engineer and a GIS specialist who serve primarily for NCDOT support. We also expect to soon have a gauge technician available for assistance with the stream gauge network maintenance. These positions help to lessen the burden on NC Emergency Management and greatly enhance the ability for them to respond to and support NCDOT's needs. So some lessons that we've learned are that communication and documentation are keys to success. We've learned the value of our interagency collaboration. We've learned the benefits of technology and innovation, leveraging that between our 2 agencies. And we've learned the value of having NCDOT liaisons working at NC Emergency Management offices. Some future goals are to continue development of FEMA and FEMA-T and other tools for preparedness, response, and recovery in storm events, participation with NCFMP in joint research projects to promote greater efficiency and quality in the services provided by our agencies to the public, more utilization of 2D hydraulic modeling on NCDOT projects and supporting NCFMP's efforts in coordinating with FEMA on 2D model acceptance for NFIP compliance, and incorporating climate change adaptation into resilient design. Thank you for your attention. And these websites shown here offer additional information and contact information. And I hope you have a great day. Thank you.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for watching that, and Jerry, thank you for recording that. So we've got some questions already, so I'm going to fire away. So the first one was, how are map changes made by the NCDOT projects? How are the changes made by the NCDOT projects incorporated into the flood maps?
Well, we basically, the projects that NCDOT does, we'll submit a package of information that has the work map and the all of the information that is required for project approval. We'll package that all up and we'll send that via electronic process to floodplain mapping, and then the contractors review those, and there's a response, comments and responses, and then finally an approval is given. And then once that final approval is done, then floodplain mapping retains that information, and as they are updating each county, when they have a new county to study, they'll take that information and they'll incorporate it into the new maps. And then certain of the MOAs do require a letter of map revision afterwards, and so we have a process where we provide the as-built surveys and then get the LOMAR approval process through FEMA, and then that gets incorporated into the new studies as floodplain mapping. Whenever they come up with a new county study that they're doing, then they'll incorporate those new LOMARs or the MOAs for the ones that didn't require a LOMAR.
So speaking of the MOA, there was a question, and this is one that I had actually thought about too, and I'm kind of curious. And so the question states, it's broken into several parts. So it says, does your MOA require annual memorializing approvals? And if not, what time frame does that occur? Like, how often do you revisit that MOA and the agreement in place?
So the MOA started in 2008, and I think we had another update to it in, I believe it was 2012. And then the latest one, well, I said the latest one was 2020, but before that was 2016. There is no set time frame, but it really is, as things evolve, new technologies and new ways of doing things happen in the old MOA. There's things that may need to be corrected, or procedures, protocols have changed. Then we've gone through a process, and it goes before the Board of Transportation and gets official signatures, and then it has to go to NC Emergency Management, and that they're under the Department of Public Safety, so they have their signatures, and it's kind of a long, involved, formal process to get all that done. And one good thing about this latest version of the MOA, which we haven't fully implemented it yet, is that we took out a lot of the previous, I said 2016 MOA was probably about, 12 pages long, and it had a lot of details in it. We took a lot of those out, and it's down to about a 2-page basic document that just says, just a statement of our agreement with one another, and that additional documentation on how we're going to, our procedures and so forth, and how we're going to fund things, and all that is going to be handled under separate documentation that we'll just post on our website. So that way it won't have to go through a long formal process anytime we need to change. And then we can change. We're anticipating, maybe updating that documentation maybe once a year as needed, with agreement between our agencies.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Second kind of part to that, and does it include any annual budget adjustments, or does it involve elected officials? You kind of just went over that, or other department heads, I should say, but I think you just kind of spoke to that. Yeah. But are there any budget adjustments that are made as you go through that process?
Well, I will say the previous way that we did the MOA was we had about 12 different MOA types, and each one had a certain funding associated with it. So when an approval was done on a given project, one type might provide $3,000, for that approval to floodplain mapping, to incorporate that into their maps and so forth. Other lesser changes might be like a $1,500 approval or something. And it was just kind of piecemeal based on each project. And with this latest revision, we're moving to a more programmatic approach where what we hope to do is just to be able to transfer, a certain amount of funding at the beginning of the year and, spend that down as we need to, and then revisit that, on either a semi-annual or an annual basis. We haven't fleshed out the details on that yet, but I think a more programmatic basis is going to be more efficient than the way we were doing it.
A new question just came in. Does your MOA, does the agreement work for model back zone A's? And actually, does it allow you to skip and I think you mentioned this in your presentation, does it allow you to skip the Clomar portion with your MOA?
If a Clomar is required, then no, we're not allowed to skip it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And does it work for, I assume, any type of, whether it be a detailed zone A or a model back zone A, works the same way?
Yes. No, in North Carolina, I'm not sure about all states, but we have something called limited detailed studies.
Mm-hmm.
We used to have zone A's all throughout North Carolina, and those have all been pretty much replaced by what we call limited detailed studies, which are regulated in North Carolina very similarly to a detailed study. They have, instead of a floodway, they have what's called a non-encroachment area that is regulated the same as a floodway. So, but I guess the CFR, I'm going to get this wrong, 44 CFR C10 rule, I think people kind of know it, about not allowing more than a foot of increase in the base flood elevation. Essentially, that applies to the limited detailed studies. So I hope that answered the question.
So there was one other question, although you touched on it earlier, and I just want to kind of bring it back up. We got about 2 minutes left here, and it was who actually does the review of your submittals. And I think you mentioned it goes over, and I guess just like any other submittal would come in, maybe reviewed by a contractor or other members of the state organization. Is that correct?
Yes, if it's a very minor, either a no rise or a very minor decrease. We actually have with the previous version of the MOA in 2016, we had a delegation for NCDOT to get our own contractors that were approved by floodplain mapping to review those submittals. And then anything that is more significant, like a large decrease in the base flood elevation or a minor increase in a limited detailed study that I was just talking about. A lot of those were actually sent to floodplain mapping, and they would have their contractors that they contract with to review those. And we use the same contractors pretty much. That way they are comfortable with, what we approve, and we have confidence that everything's consistent.
Well, thank you, Jerry. I did work a lot in the CTP realm, and so I think that's a really great model. And just having, I think that MOA, you've certainly demonstrated the value that it brings. So I appreciate your time. We're going to go ahead and move on. There's probably some more chat. Yeah, thank you. There'll probably be some more questions coming up over in Slido, but I want to go ahead and take this opportunity to kind of move us into our next presentation and introduce our next speaker, who is Nancy Durham. She is the floodplain administrator for Fairbanks North Star Borough, and she is going to be giving us a presentation entitled Correcting an Overstated Unnumbered A Zone for the Chena Slough, I hope I said that right, Nancy, through a CTP grant. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that over to this video, and then we'll have a Q&A with Nancy here after that.
Hi, I'm Nancy Durham, the Floodplain Administrator for the Fairbanks North Star Borough. I'm discussing correcting an unnumbered A zone for the Chena Slough through a cooperative technical partnership. The order will be the background of the Chena Slough flood study, and the benefits of the detailed flood study. Why it's important to have corrected flood maps. That's the million-dollar question. That's what we're going to answer through this study. A little bit of the background for the Chena Slough. First off, Fairbanks, North Star Borough is located in the heart of Alaska. We're in the interior. We're known as the Golden Heart community because we're directly smack dab in the middle. There's no coastal areas around us. We have riverines and mountains. It's beautiful. With this, we have braided channels, river channel beds, which most of the U.S. does not have. Our Tanana River is one of those rivers. It's located south of the Fairbanks North Star Borough and pretty much south of North Pole as well. So it cuts off the residential area where everything south of that's more open military lands, and everything north of that is residential and communities. The Chena Slough at one point was connected to the Tanana River, which is located, it came off of the Tanana River south of Salcha. So that's further down in our community, more towards the southeast portion of the borough. It disconnected and it came up. It went all the way through to Fairbanks, the city of Fairbanks, and then it went back into the Tanana River. So this whole slough was pretty wide at the time because of all that flowing water off of the Tanana River and then return into the Tanana River. This shows you one of the areas of where that water from the Tanana River is coming off, going into the slough area. And as you can see in this picture, you can see the braided channels. So not the entire area does not fill up completely with water, just those different channelings that's running through there. Here's an aerial view from a plane showing that water coming off of the Tanana River going into the Chena Slough. Now I'm going to show you different aerial photography between 1938 and 2017. This is the current map. However, we had aerial photography back in 1938, although it was mosaic photos that had to be pieced together and taped together. We do get a picture of what the river system did look like back in the 1938s. All of that bright white water that you see, that is silt and sediment flowing through the Tanana River. That also comes off of the Chena Slough. Then, as we slide that map out of our way, we can see the current pictometry of 2017. You can still see the bright white water for the Tanana River in the lower portion of that picture. And then you can see that I have the river highlighted in the blue to show you what the river system off of the Tanana River looks like. Those, after they're cut off from the Tanana River, are no longer that bright white because they don't have all that sediment and that silk flowing through them. And when there's not all that water flowing through, those channels shrink in size as well. So this is just a zoomed in view showing here's the city of North Pole with the Tanana River, and the Chena Slough is to the east of North Pole, whereas the Tanana River's to the southwest of North Pole. And that river's going up. Again, this is the 1938 picture, so it's white. So you can see the Chena Slough a little bit more pronounced in this picture. You can also see in this picture how it's flowing directly through the city of Fairbanks, which created a lot of flooding in Fairbanks. We had a big flood of 1909, another one in 1949, and then we had our huge flood in 1967. But before the huge flood, we're going to get into after the 1940, right before the 1949 flood. Here, we're looking at where, because of that flooding, they wanted to disconnect the slough from the Tanana River. So they constructed the Moose Creek Dike. Here's the zoomed in version showing where the slough is. Then the yellow line is showing you where that proposed dike was going to go in to cut off that water and disconnect it. So this was proposed in 1938 after a lot of those floods we had in town. Here in probably the 40s, early 40s, we're seeing that actual dike. So you can see where the Chena Slough is pointed out on the picture, and where the Tanana River is south of that. Here's the map to show exactly where that Moose Creek dike was going to go into effect, and in relation to the city of Fairbanks. So now we can see where the Tanana River is and where Fairbanks is in relation to where that dike went into effect. In the 40s, we have them actually photography showing them constructing that dike road. This road became the Richardson Highway way back when, before the main Richardson Highway went into effect, which is one of our primary roads in the borough. Here is another picture from a different view showing that dike and showing how all that water is cut off. You see all that water up against the dike road, whereas before it was flowing through there. This is the Army Corps of Engineers map to show exactly where the dike went in, and just some drawings of how they did the dike, because this is telling you, oh, it's a rock-filled dike, which again became the Richardson Highway. And you can see on this map the Chena Slough. Here's just a zoom-in version of that, and here's another picture showing their drawings. Going back to the aerial photography, we can see where that dike is now on these pictures. We can also see, because of that big flood of 1967, Fairbanks needed to disconnect further that water flowing in through downtown Fairbanks. So they proposed building the Moose Creek Dam and levee. This yellow line shows where that Moose Creek Dam went in and was going to be located to officially completely cut off the Chena Slough from the Tanana River. And you could also see up in the upper screen towards the top, the Chena River zigzagging along that area. So the dike at the Chena River put in floodgates to lower and open those gates as the water got to a certain level. We're going to do some comparison pictures to show why this is important. So this is a 2017 aerial photography. As you can see, there's a lot of development, but we're going to look at two segments of one of the Chena Slough and one of the Chena River, showing the differences between 1938 and 2017. The first picture, we're seeing the Chena Slough at the Nordale Bridge. This is showing how wide that slough is, and it was 233 feet wide at that location. And you could see that the water in that slough is white because it had all that sediment flowing through that water. Then in 2017, you could see that the Chena Slough's only, same location, only 30 feet wide. After it was disconnected, you don't have all that water flowing. It's not a main river anymore. You don't have boats using it like big steamboats that used to use it way back when. So now it's a slough, a real slough, not a big river. There's no flowing water. Now we're going to look at the Chena River, and this is at, again, near the Nordale Bridge in 1938. You can see the difference in the bank here, which is outlined in yellow, showing the curvature of the river. But then when we go to 2017, you can see that that river moved about 144 feet with the changes to the water flowing. We're going to get into our flood study now. In 2014, the Fairbanks North Star Borough adopted new flood maps. However, we strongly believed that these maps overstated the flood zone for the Chena Slough. Our first set of maps for the Chena Slough were back in 1942. These maps showed an unnumbered A zone, not a nice size, but in 2014, in several areas, that special flood hazard area significantly increased. And we wanted to do a detailed study to say, no, that's not what happened. That's not what's actually going on. We need to do a study so we can prove this and change our maps. At this point, again, the Chena Slough is not connected any longer to the Tanana River. The Moose Creek Dam's built, the Tanana River levees constructed along the entire levee, and instead of the Chena Slough flowing back into the Tanana River, it now flows into the Chena River because it's a slough and not a river. And this map shows the study area. Then, for our timeline, we began our study in 2015. It was completed in 2016 and then sent to FEMA. And after that, in 2017, we took those work maps, we went out and sent letters to every resident along the Chena Slough that was impacted by that special flood hazard area. Then we held community meetings to discuss these maps to show them, look, this is what we found out. This is what's coming down. We want to get you prepared. We want to let you know. Start talking to your insurance. And then in 2019, we finally got, after all of the quality control checks, our preliminary maps from FEMA. We again went back out to the community. We'd held 2 meetings. We had an open house, and then we had a meeting with FEMA, who came and also helped talk to our residents and just discuss with our residents, hey, we got these preliminary maps. There's an appeal period. If you have any other further information, now's the time to present it to do any further changes. We did not have any appeals during that appeal period. In 2020, before everything shut down, we received our letter of final determination. So at that point, we had to get the process done to get our maps adopted. We only had 6 months to do that. It's kind of hard to do that during a pandemic when people aren't working or working from home and you have to have public hearings, but we accomplished a task. In August, we had our assembly meeting, and then in September, we had our public hearing. So we also went to the Planning Commission in July because we have a 3-step process. Our maps were officially adopted September 18th, 2020, which our residents loved because I've gotten multiple phone calls since 2019. Are the maps adopted yet? My insurance is being renewed. I need to know what's going on. So not yet. Hang tight. We're working on it. Last year, we officially adopted those maps because of this study. I'm going to show you, this is present day map showing the Chena Slough. There's 3 segments in particular that I'm going to talk about. We're going to start with segment 1 and work our way down to segment 2. So I'm going downstream instead of upstream in reverse, which normally, you do the other way. For segment 1, the first picture shows our map in 1992. Then in 2014, there weren't significant changes in this area between these 2 maps. However, when we adopted our new maps in September of last year, you can see a significant change in just how much area came out of that special flood hazard area. Segment 2 is our biggest overstated area with the adoption of those 2014 maps. You can see in 1992 that those maps were normal, but then substantially increased in 2014. And after we got our preliminary maps and adopted those new maps in 2020, you can see just how much those areas shrunk, where hardly any of that overstated area is in the special flood hazard area anymore. Segment 3 is in between the 2 with those areas. 2014 was a slight increase from 1992, but 2020 was a significant decrease. You do notice in our maps, we now have a regulatory floodway along the Chena Slough. Regulatory floodway is the highest risk, most costly area to build because that's where you have the deepest, fastest moving water. We are glad that FEMA presented, hey, we want to put a regulatory floodway on the slough because otherwise, with this being an AE zone with no regulatory floodway, all of the property owners would have had to do a no-rise certification for any new development in that special flood hazard area. This costs anywhere from $2,000 to $14,000 depending on what they're doing and what level of detail needs to be submitted for those per development, per property. So if you're doing more than one development items, like this year one thing, next year something else, that's 2 no-rise certifications. We prefer the regulatory floodway because only those areas developed within that floodway require that no-rise and backup. As you can see, this property here has 2 buildings that normally without that regulatory floodway that would have had to do no rises if this was developed after these maps. Now they don't. The benefits of this detailed flood study. First off, when this study was done, before it was started, there was over 400 structures within that special flood hazard area. Now that we've had this detailed study, 178 acres was removed from the special flood hazard area, but most significantly, 348 full structures, 131 partial structures that were in completely came out, and that's 470 non-structures removed from the special flood hazard area. No more flood insurance. And if they're still required because they have flood zone on their property, it's the preferred risk policy, which is a whole lot cheaper for these residents, and it saves them a lot of money. This study only brought in 2 accessory structures that were not in the flood zone prior to this study. We used Matsu's insurance cost savings. This is a conservative approach. As you can see, our 479 structures removed. When you do the calculation over the life of a mortgage, how much money that is in flood insurance, that's over $5 million. With only those 2 accessory structures, that would have only added $21,000. When you do the net savings, that's still $5 million in savings on flood insurance for these residents and property owners. In conclusion, why it's important to have corrected flood maps. 1, you want to know which structures and properties are in the flood zone, the correct flood zone. These buildings need to be built correctly if they're in the flood zone. However, if they're not in the flood zone, they do not need to pay all of that extra money to elevate or put in vents, any of those additional costs to get their building constructed correctly. Also, it saves our residents millions of dollars in flood insurance costs. And lastly, it keeps that money in our community and it doesn't go outside. So that helps our economy for all of our residents. Again, I just wanted to show you with one last map. This is today's map in 2020, showing you our Chena River, which is our braided channel to the south of Fairbanks and North Pole, the dam and levee system showing that Chena Slough is not connected any longer to the Chena River. Our Chena River that flows through town now, that's regulated, so we're not having all of those floods. In fact, since 1967, our next flood of record would have been our 1992. However, we did not have flooding downtown that caused any damage to residents. It impounded water into that floodway, moving it back to the Chena River. Here's a list of resources for any additional information. And if you have any questions, which we're about to have a question and answer time, or outside of this session, you can email me any of your questions. Thank you.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to the live session. I'm joined with Nancy, and I just mentioned it to her while we were kind of getting ready to go live here again. I've really liked that presentation. I thought the style, the back and forth was great. And anyways, I just wanted to say that was a really great presentation, Nancy. So I'm curious about a few things. One, I think your presentation really is a testament to how much being really invested at the local level can certainly have a dramatic impact, as you mentioned. I mean, over 400 structures that were impacted from that. So obviously, I know there was a long duration between studies. But tell me a little bit about the updated or the new topographic data that was used. Did you actually go out and get new data for the study you all did, or was that even different than that larger zone A that was published, or was it the same data set? Or tell me a little bit about that. So
for this particular study, we flew LiDAR, updated LiDAR, and since we've flown more updated LiDAR for almost the entire urban area. Back when that study and those original maps were done, it was the old USGS quad maps topo, which, as we all know, were great for the time, but didn't really tell the whole story. And then with development and subsidence, because we have a lot of permafrost, so you have a lot of different elements that change the terrain. So we flew LiDAR prior to that study.
From a funding standpoint, I think some people would be curious to know, did you have any challenges trying to fund this study, as a local borough community? I mean, or did you run into any hurdles or people that you really had to convince, or was there just buy-in right off the bat in terms of kind of going forward with this local study?
This one, we had a lot of buy-in because, again, those maps were so overstated and everybody in that area kept saying, we don't flood. We had so many letter of map changes and for the letter of map amendments for a lot of those property owners along the slough, just because they weren't flooded since that dam and levee went in and disconnected the slough from the Tanana River. With our CTP grant, we only needed $90,000 to do the entire study, which was very reasonable, and it was easier because it was under 100,000 to go through our assembly process to get that funding approved and adopted to start this study.
So got some questions coming in now too. It said, before you completed that detailed study with the CTP funds, did you have any issues getting the Clomar-Lomar studies to agree? And would you recommend this approach for other communities that tend to depend on the Clomars and the Lomars to fix their mapping?
We didn't have Clomars and Lomars for that area. This was a physical map revision because there were so many panels involved. The residents didn't have issues with getting their letter of map amendments because they had their elevation certificates because it was required for their flood insurance, and they didn't want to pay those substantial amounts of money for flood insurance. So they went and applied for that to get that approved to lower their costs. But this way, by us doing the physical map revision and after this study, it allowed them to not have to have any of those worries with insurance or new buyers, new sellers and new buyers coming into that area.
I know you said that, obviously with your timeline and certainly with the pandemic, it's been a challenge. I'm curious, have you done any kind of follow-up along a lot of those 400 plus structures that came out to determine if people are continuing to carry flood insurance possibly at the preferred rate, or do you have any kind of statistics on that, or is that, I wasn't sure if you looked into that at all?
We don't get those numbers. We're not a community rating system program, so we don't know exactly how many policies are in effect. I do know from the 2017 community meeting with everybody waiting for those maps to be adopted every year at renewal time, they will call me up. Are they adopted yet? Can I get rid of my insurance yet? So I do know a lot of them did drop their insurance. The only ones that probably kept it were those required because they had a federally backed loan and there was still special flood hazard area on their property. We have a 50-50 shot of our property owners, depending on who their lender is, or whether or not they're still going to be required to have flood insurance if there's even a 1% chance of flood zone on their property. So those would still have insurance, but everybody else, I'm pretty sure they dropped it. As many calls as I've received since, until those maps were adopted, I know they were ready to drop it.
Sure. Definitely more questions coming in here. Did you ever approach FEMA about, in terms of doing a new study, in terms of kind of going back into the risk map cycle, or was that ever a consideration, or did you just say, no, we're going to take this on as a CTP?
We took that one on as a CTP. That was actually before I came into this position. So I finished that process. My predecessor started that whole process. We have started another cooperative technical partnership, which hopefully down the road we'll talk on at one of these sessions for the Tanana River, and that one we're looking to bring into the risk map process. This one didn't go in, it was before that, so it was just CTP. But
Okay.
our next ones we're looking to hopefully bring into the process.
Speaking of the Tanana River, someone asked, have you done an analysis for the H&H impacts to the Tanana River, or is that in the works?
That is in our current ongoing study right now. We're doing a Tanana River Salcher flood study, and then that continued into a Tanana River floodway study. So we're studying the entire Tanana River from Salcha to Salcheket, past the airport, so it's further west. So it's covering a huge spectrum of the Tanana River to update all that.
Was the study, was it a 1D or was it a 2D? And if it was not done on 2D, do you anticipate that maybe in the future sometime, or was it a 1D or 2D study?
The Chena River was the Chena Slough was a 2D study.
Okay.
So it would be the Tanana River.
Okay. Someone asked, what's the elevation difference possibly between the mountains and the community? They said that they noticed it was so what's that elevation difference? Is it dramatic, very steep?
Depending on what part of town you're in, we have some elevations that start at 426, and then other areas go up to 700. If you're on the west side of town by the airport, that's around the 426. And as you go towards North Pole and the east side of town, the elevations increase.
So we got a few minutes here. I had two questions came in very similar. And it was kind of related a little bit to what I was asking about that follow-up. I'm curious, what has been the message to folks about continuing to maintain their flood insurance? Is that something that have you all, as the community, as the face of the floodplain administrator, really been encouraging that for people that have come out, or if people come to you with questions?
I tell everybody, if it rains, it can flood. So flood insurance is recommended. We can't require it if it's not required. However, we do strongly recommend it. And every time I talk to somebody, or if they get an email from me, it says in there, flood insurance is recommended. So we do let people know, yeah, you could still flood even if you're in an area you don't think can flood, because if there's a pipe break or something and it goes over surface and hits like 3 or 4 properties, that's a flood. So with our spring breakup and with our ice jams and then our rainy seasons, there's many different types of floods we can get.
Well, Nancy, again, great job. I really liked the presentation. Great story, great example of community engagement and involvement and really making a difference. So great job. So I am going to go ahead and introduce our third and final presentation here for this E4 session. And I'm going to introduce Laura Algeo, who many of you know. She is the CTP lead at FEMA headquarters. She will also be joined by her colleague Tahir Benabdi, who's also supporting her on the CTP program. And then actually when we switch over to the Q&A, another fantastic member of the CTP team, Rachel Bradley, who's with the PM team, will also be joining us to help answer questions. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the presentation that Laura and Tahir did.
Hey, welcome to the ASFPM Conference 2021 presentation of the Technical Partners 5-year operations plan. We are recently closing out our last 5-year operations plan, and we're in the process of developing the next. So over the course of this presentation, we'll give you a bit more information on where that's at and where we're headed. For this presentation, we have Laura Algeo, that's myself, presenting. I am the Cooperating Technical Partners lead for FEMA headquarters. And we also have Tahir Benabdi, who supports the CTP program at FEMA headquarters as well. So on the agenda today, what we're going to talk a little bit about is a recap of some of the progress that we've made over the last year with the CTP program, where we've come from the conference and what we presented on last year. Also talk about some of the key insights and findings from our 2020 feedback survey. We've finalized a report and have all of that information detailed, and we'll be providing some of those highlights and how those tie in to our next operations plan. We'll talk a little bit about the closeout of the 2017 to 21 plan, some of the things that we've accomplished, and some of the things that are still outstanding that'll be rolled into our new plan. And then we'll talk through the framework for the next 5-year operations plan and give you a bit more detail about when that will be completed and how that will roll out. So with that, I want to turn it over to Tahir Benabdi to go through some of the preliminary discussions.
Thanks, Laura. I first want to start out by recapping what took place for the last year. During the 2020 ASFPM conference, the CTP program provided preliminary results of the 2020 feedback survey, which was administered in February of 2020. Since then, we've completed a detailed analysis of the feedback and developed an interactive Tableau dashboard to visualize the data. We shared those results with our CTP community of practice on April 12th, in which the parts 1 and 2 are available on the CTP Collaboration Center. Now, using the insights from that feedback survey, we are building the framework of the next operations plan to set the course of the CTP program starting in 2022. Here are some examples of the Tableau dashboard that you will see in the next few weeks will be available on the CTP collaboration site. This dashboard provided by the Tableau program is a data visualization tool that helps us with presenting the results of the survey and doing some data analytics to present that in more coherent manner. The static version of the PDF for the Tableau dashboard is available currently on the CTP Collaboration Center. Now I'd like to go over the top 10 key insights and findings from that 2020 feedback survey. Item 1, the diverse CTP stakeholder community is committed to the future success of the program by investing its experience, project management capabilities, and industry knowledge. For example, CTPs with 10 or more years of experience were the most prevalent group of respondents to the survey, indicating that these with the most industry knowledge are invested in the future successes and effectiveness of the program. Since they've been the longest standing beneficiaries and users of the program, the CTP program should continue to find ways to solicit their feedback and ideas for improving the program, including on the next 5-year operations plan. Number 2, overall, the CTP program is considered successful by its stakeholders. Success is defined by the outcome of improved maps and technical data, improved outreach and communication, higher capabilities and efficient use of resources, stronger partnerships with FEMA and communities, and greater awareness of resources and needs across organizations and multiple levels of government. Number 3, in addition to these successes, the program has improved over the last 5 years due to changes made in its implementation. Much of the success can be attributed to high-quality, well-aligned training opportunities and coordination at the regional level, since FEMA regions have the greatest understanding and perspective on what their CTP organizations need. Number 4, despite nearly unanimous agreement that their participation in CTP projects is successful, many respondents feel stuck with performance measures that do not accurately reflect that success, signaling a gap between how CTPs define success and how FEMA reports on performance. Both FEMA and CTP respondents can benefit from more guidance and training about how to define measures, how to report performance, and how to leverage CTP FEMA coordination to collaboratively tailor and develop performance measures. Through its internal stakeholders, define the CTP program as a success, and there are processes, tools, and guidance in place to capture its value, impact, and return on investment. There is inconsistency across the regions in how performance is tracked and measured, how CTP participation is tracked and reported, and to what extent leverage is captured. Incorporating more consistent practices in capturing and reporting that information will enable the program to build a more cohesive narrative to internal and external audiences that frequently request program impact information, such as Congress and Risk Management Directive leadership. Number 6. The diverse CTP, the CTPs desire more opportunities to engage and connect with FEMA staff and other CTPs and receive program information and guidance on a regular basis. FEMA can make a positive impact on management and operations of the CTP program through better communication on performance measures, increased communication opportunities with FEMA regions, and increased feedback opportunities for CTPs. As new performance measures reporting tool is rolled out to CTPs, and as greater efforts are made to improve use and awareness of the CTP Collaboration Center and the new learning resources poised for release in 2021, clear and frequent communication, including trainings and webinars, will be imperative to provide the best chance for uptake. Number 7, CTPs desire more opportunities to learn, especially through webinars and trainings in the areas of mapping and other technical engineering topics, project management, and communications. The CTP program should find new ways of marketing and sharing the webinars and training opportunities with its diverse CTP community of practice to maximize participation. Also, there's an opportunity for past webinars and trainings to be shared more widely to increase use. However, difficulty accessing and using the CTP Collaboration Center could be inhibiting the use of recorded trainings. Number 8, CTPs want the ability to exercise more innovation, greater flexibility, and a greater support from FEMA. Additionally, they would like simplification of administrative processes, better understanding of the project types, more training and programmatic guidance, increased collaboration engagement among all partners, and program flexibility to prioritize meeting local needs. Number 9, most of the CTP stakeholder community is invested in the future of flood risk data, or FFRD for short, and unsurprisingly view the role of private sector and state, local, tribal, and territorial activities as vital to its success. Respondents believe that FEMA's implementation of the FFRD can be best supported through shifting from binary to graduated flood hazard risks, improving outreach and communication about risk rating 2.0 with CTPs and communities, and making updated flood risk data more widely available. Respondents wish to be a part of defining the opportunities to ensure that they meet the needs of all stakeholders. And number 10, while many people are excited about the opportunities of FFRD and risk map evolution will bring to the program, there is still a gap in awareness, understanding, and buy-in of these activities and how they will impact implementation of the CTP program. In pivoting towards the future of risk map, the reflecting of activities that would prioritize and deprioritize. If funding levels are increased or decreased, CTPs would continue to prioritize flood hazard risk communication and training to communities regardless of funding levels. Next slide. We also wanted to connect these results and insights back to the current operations plan so that we can evaluate the progress we have made over the last 5 years. This operations plan kicked off in 2017 and will be wrapping up at the end of fiscal year 2021. The 5 goals of the 2017-2021 operations plan include Goal 1, to develop a comprehensive training program to improve FEMA and CTP program knowledge. Goal 2, to identify relevant programmatic tools, resources, and programmatic best practices to help CTPs be more efficient, help raise risk awareness in communities. Goal 3, to develop a strategic collaborations plan to help improve communications across partners. Goal 4, to integrate performance measures outcomes, and metrics into the CTP program in order to improve and evaluate program planning and grants processes. Goal 5, to develop and integrate communications resources and best practices CTPs can use to help raise risk awareness in communities. We've already completed several items under each of these goals, but I will note some examples of progress that were made over the past 5 years. Under Goal 1 of training, we have launched the Learning Self-Assessment Tool. We completed a 5-part webinar series for the Mapping Information Platform, or MIP, and developed one e-learning course. We have another e-learning course coming out later this spring focused on hydrology and hydraulics. Under Goal 3, we developed an onboarding toolbox and made it available on the CTP Collaboration Center. We developed a members database to have better visibility of our partners and ensure all CTP stakeholders are receiving important communications and attending meetings and learning opportunities. We have expanded the use of the CTP Collaboration Center by leveraging that platform to disseminate important program announcements and information. Finally, under Goal 4, we developed the Performance Measures Matrix for the NOFO, which organizes the desired programs, outcomes, and outputs, and, and aligns them with the goals of the Risk Map program. We have also launched the Performance Measures Reporting Tool, which establishes a centralized location for reporting progress on performance measures. And we launched the CTP Recognition Program, which formally recognizes top performing CTPs, whereby CTPs nominate and vote on their peers' projects. We just wrapped up our 5th annual recognition program, and thus far it's been a huge success. It brings credibility to the program by showcasing the excellent work being achieved across the country. We've accomplished quite a bit, and there's still quite more to come. We are working to fold the unfinished action items of the last operations plan to the new one. And this segues into our next segment that Laura will talk about.
Thank you so much, Tahir. So we've been doing quite a bit of work over the last 5 years since we rolled out our first operations plan. We've been able to accomplish quite a few things that Tahir highlighted. Some of those you can read through the rest on the slide deck. But we also still have some things to do. We want to ensure the continued success of the program as we go forward. So where do we go from here? So what we've done is we've started to have coordination efforts with our CTP stakeholders. So the CTP Community of Practice Steering Committee that has representatives from all 10 regions, as well as the FEMA regional staff. We've started talking about what this framework should be for the next 5-year operations plan. Please do note that the information that we're about to go over is draft. It hasn't been completely finalized and vetted by all of the stakeholders as of yet, but these are some of our initial considerations that we plan to roll out, build more detail on, and provide to stakeholders throughout the next 6 to 8 months to review and give feedback on. So the main 5 things that we're looking at for this year's 5-year operations plan, first is enhancing performance. Performance continues to be important. It was added to the 2 CFR 200 requirements for all grants to really look at a performance. But we also just want to ensure that the partners have the tools and resources they need to maintain being a high performing partner. So we want to continue to enhance those resources. Second, we also look at advancing learning options, concepts, and training. So really moving forward these different concepts on learning components as well as training objectives. Those have been very successful over the last 5 years. They continue to rate very highly. I'll give a bit more detail of that when I go through that particular goal, but we want to continue to advance those forward. Third is integration into future planning and execution. So really making sure that the CTPs have a way to be integrated into deciding the future of the program and being a part of the planning components related to that, and ultimately the execution of the flood hazard mapping risk assessment programs. Fourth is program communication and guidance. So we want to continue to provide good information and guidance out to all of our partners, ensuring they're connected in both the development of those guidance documents and communications, and making sure that we're sharing it in a way that makes it useful for the partners and easily able to access. And then last is identification and inclusion of program innovations and efficiencies. So there's a lot of work that's being done by our cooperating technical partners out in the field in all of the regions. And we want to make sure that we're continuing to identify those and understand them and include those as we start to look at different innovations and efficiencies that can be applied to the program as a whole. We want to share that information and provide it to all of the regions. So how will this kind of play out as far as our operations plan? We will have what I just laid out are the 5 main goals. And then as we go into the goals, we'll start to identify more clear objectives that we want to accomplish based on those goals. And then once we get those objectives lined up, then we can move into action. So what are those actual tactile things that we can do to start to move these things forward, starting to actually make development of items. And then that ultimately will lead to different deliverables, be that something tangible that's delivered out or integration into different guidance or program control measures. So that's how the 5-year operations plan will lay out. And so what I want to do is go through those 5 goals that I just laid out and some of the initial thoughts we have for those objectives and actions, keeping in mind that this information will be provided out through different venues over, again, as I said, the course of the next 6 or 8 months. So for goal one is enhancing performance. So obviously there are several things that we can already identify based on feedback that we got from the survey results. You know, through the survey, we had identification that about 40% of the respondents found the performance measures kind of difficult to understand. So we have a system for performance management, and we really need to enhance that and provide more guidance on that. So as you start to look at the first objective, which is establishing that system for performance measurement, it has 3 actions that we can already kind of see at this point. One is launching a finalized reporting tool. So we are working on a tool that will help streamline the process of gathering that performance information, as well as streamline the data itself and ensure that folks understand what it is. The second is developing webinars and guidance materials for performance reporting tool. So we had about 80% of folks who said that they just need more clarity when it comes to performance measures. And so we want to make sure that we're providing different guidance materials as well as training opportunities and learning opportunities for folks to understand what those performance measures are and how they play into the tool. And we also want to establish guidance for analyzing the data and providing feedback to CTPs. So when we have this in place, we'll be able to then start to see trends and understand better, you know, if we're having a problem in a specific area across all partners, maybe that's an issue with our guidance or some of our communications, right? So it'll really help us direct the resources where they need to go to ensure that CTPs are successful. We also want to expand the definition of success. So we want to really look at actions related to that, looking at working groups with regions for non-technical partners. So we got feedback that, you know, about 77% really just want more coordination and collaboration, and that they feel that that they're feeling successful, but partners are feeling successful, but they don't feel like the measures quite reflect that. And we feel that a lot of this is tied to some of the non-technical projects that may be being done and related to communications and outreach and other mitigation technical assistance. So we want to look at one of the actions that we're proposing is a working group with the regions and CTPs, obviously, on these non-technical projects to really see what are the best ways to identify success in these areas. And we also want to continue to explore the possibility of putting CTP categorizations into place so that we can better understand the different types of partners we have. The program is really defined in order to make sure that we have access to different types of partners and we're able to utilize those partners' capabilities to enhance the program. And so not everybody has capabilities across all components of the program, and we really want to highlight the capabilities that are available and utilize those. So we want to work to continue to see if there's value in that tiering or categorization of CTP. And then incentivizing knowledge and improving leverage reporting. From the survey results, we had about 46% of the respondents said that they don't provide leverage. We have a blue book and we want to make sure that it's reflective of current situations and it's reflected of all of the definitions that might exist for partners who might be leveraging their resources in the CTP. And we also want to talk about communication and guidance related to inputting their leverage and how that gets reported both at the project development stage when you're getting your initial funding, as well as throughout integration and coordination of the project through the mapping information platform as you deliver your deliverables through the life cycle of a project. So goal 2, moving on to goal 2, is advancing learning concepts and training. We want to make more training materials more accessible. We have a lot of information out on the collaboration site. We have the learning self-assessment tool that's out on the collaboration site. But we found a lot of folks weren't using the collaboration site or aren't aware of the learning self-assessment tool. So we're trying to enhance that tool, streamline it a little bit to make it easier to use, as well as looking to incorporate it into the development and launch of a Emergency Management Institute micro-learning site. So it'll be a site that's publicly facing that will have links to the different training components, and it will have that self-assessment tool built in. So we'll be able to, as a CTP, you'll be able to go in and identify information and determine what kind of courses you might want to take, and then go directly to those webinars. We want to make sure that we're able to socialize and share the webinar menus and make sure that they're easily accessible for folks to understand what's upcoming next and be able to attend those trainings or review those trainings. We want to expand and develop CTP capabilities. So really looking at creating more trainings, learning opportunities for functional skills and program management, communications, outreach, mitigation strategies, and mapping. Goal 3 is looking at integration into future program planning and execution. So really one of the things that we heard a lot back from the feedback survey was that there were several respondents who mentioned that they'd like more information on how CTP program overlaps with other grant programs. As such, one of the things that we're delivering actually at ASFPM on Friday is a workshop on mitigation grants. There's 11 different grant programs that are going to talk about how they connect and how they can help communities to look forward for what kinds of mitigation opportunities there might be for their community. We're also looking to plan a follow-on webinar series where we can dive a little deeper into each of those topics. We're also looking to coordinate with mitigation grant programs on some of their selection criteria. For example, FMA currently has some points for CTPs that get into the application process, and we want to really coordinate on how to maximize those and make sure that they're really connected to the program and what CTPs are doing. And integrating CTPs into long-term mitigation planning across the board. Also looking to create opportunities for CTPs to learn and contribute to risk map or NFIP evolution. Tahir mentioned FFRD, Future Flood Risk Data. We want to really get stakeholder engagement touch points to help influence that. We found that 80% of the survey respondents really view the changes as an opportunity for greater CTP involvement, but they want to learn more about them and understand what they are. So we want to make sure that we're engaging those partners who are excited about those opportunities and make sure they have touch points in the development of FFRD. For goal 4, we talk about program communication and guidance. The 3 main objectives that we have highlighted here are enhancing those CTP FEMA partnerships. 77% of the survey respondents really feel that adding additional communication opportunities with the regions are critical. We started in the first operations plan developing some menus and ideas of different engagements with partners. And so we want to reestablish that regional working group with strong CTP engagement to really compile materials and make more of a toolkit that might be available for regions and CTPs to better understand the types of things that they can coordinate with their regions on, and to refine and improve that coordination. Expanding opportunities for CTP to provide feedback. So we want to refine some of our working group parameters. Some folks feel that the parameters are a little too broad, and so the working groups go on and on. So we want to make sure that we have some defined tasks with start and end dates, and really try to cycle more CTPs in to help provide feedback on those different working groups. And we want to improve the collaboration center. As I mentioned, there's not as much use. About half of the respondents said that they only use it once or twice a year. So we want to make sure that people are going to the tool more frequently and have the access to the resources that they need. So we want to clean up and curate that information, resolve any accessibility issues that we might be having currently, And then also establish a cadence and owners for site cleanup and evaluation so that we can make sure that the site stays up to date and appropriate with all of the information needed. And lastly, goal 5 is talking about identification and inclusion in program innovations and efficiencies. For this one, we really want, we have 3 main objectives that we've identified. The first is showcasing CTP best practices and high performance. So we really want to explore methods for spotlighting, leverage all-stars and invested CTPs that are really engaged in their process and working closely with the regions. We want to use a mentoring platform to help share best practices in CTP work. Many of the respondents feel that best practices are one of the most helpful tools. And so we're really working closely with ASFPM to roll out this mentoring platform so folks can, in the CTP community, can connect to one another and understand what resources they might have available. And we want to ensure that our best practices are updated and shared more regularly on FEMA.gov to get more visibility. And then also, of course, formalizing CTP briefings at new and existing venues. Showcasing regional innovations, we really want to share and memorialize regional methods and tools and some of the things that regions are doing really well so that other regions have information about those and can really work on implementing those innovations and efficiencies as we talked about. And then identify ways to streamline the CTP administration requirements. Sharing example templates, looking for standard deliverables and required documents, those types of things have been asked for. We're going to try to work on some of those. And also identifying and developing some standard operating procedures, some SOPs that could be developed for different key steps within the CTP program. So with that, what are the next steps? Where are we going? So we're going to work very closely with the CTP steering committee, the FEMA regions, and other key stakeholders as we refine these objectives and actions. We really want to get feedback. As I said, all of those slides that we just showed are draft. You may see changes and iterations of that, more objectives added, actions refined, more actions added, and the deliverables ultimately filled out. That will be a part of that final 5-year operations plan. We'll provide feedback, working feedback with the steering committee and regions, as I mentioned, and then broader feedback from the CTP community of practice as a whole. We will share this out and provide an opportunity for comment before it's finalized. And the goal is to try to finalize and share this by the end of fiscal year 2021. So if there's anyone that's not in one of these engagement communities that would like to contribute feedback on the next 5-year operations plan, definitely reach out to the email that's identified on the screen there, and we can make sure that we connect with you. And also, if you want to ask any questions or have any feedback for us, the contacts that we have, as I mentioned, from the presentation today and for the CTP program are myself, Laura Algeo, and Tahir Benabdi, and we would be glad to talk with you about any comments or questions you may have. So thank you so much for your time, and at this point, we'll open it up to any questions that you guys might have.
All right, welcome back, everyone. And as I mentioned before, we're actually joined by the cream of the crop here in terms of our CTP team. We've got Laura, Tahir, and Rachel to help answer any of your questions. So one of the questions that came in, and again, I'll just kind of throw it out there to you all and let you kind of chime in. But one of the questions was based on the results of the self-assessment tool. Is the system actually going to suggest appropriate training for any kind of deficiencies that are seen? How's that going to work?
Yeah, so currently as it's set up, we have that capability. It's behind the Collaboration Center, and we have some courses that are dated, and we're going through a cleanup effort of some of those pieces, and as we move it to the micro learning site. But the anticipation is that you would be able to put in information about the types of roles that you do for the CTP program, and it would give you a listing of courses that would be available for you to take.
I had another question kind of come in about, it was interesting, I noted on one of the slides, and I tried to capture the slide number real quick, but I missed it, but it talked about CTPs wanting kind of greater flexibility in some of their opportunities for that. Did you ever get any insight on what that meant by greater flexibility? Is it study related? Is it, the application of different support? And yeah, I'm not sure if you could expand on that a little.
Yeah, I think it varies from CTP to CTP. I think there's some folks that want just the ability to not be so tied to some of the processes that we have in place, from the financial reporting, programmatic reporting, some of those pieces that are just very sort of strict and mandated. And then there's others that are looking to really kind of think more outside the box and deliver data in a different way, deliver information through different mechanisms. And so, we try to work with each CTP individually and the regions, of course, to try to see if there's different ways that they can improve and or innovate on some of the deliverables that they're having. So I think it across the board seemed to be a bit of all of the above.
No, I figured there was probably a lot of information there. So if people are interested, you also mentioned that, I know you've got working groups and you've talked about standing up more working groups in the future as you implement this. If people are interested in joining that, how can they go about, or who should they contact?
We have a joint email box that you could send information to, and I know it, but I
have it. Yes, if you're interested in joining our working groups or getting more involved, we would love for that. So you can email ctpadmin@riskmapcds.com. So that's ctpadmin@riskmapcds.com.
Well, I know we're pretty tight on time right here, and I'm sure there's going to be other questions coming in, but I just want to thank all three of you and for being here, and for everyone that was part of this session. I thought it was great. A lot of good ideas that were shared. So anyways, thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference. And again, I'm sure if you've got other questions, please feel free to reach out to Tahir, Laura, or Rachel for that matter. So everyone have a wonderful afternoon, and hopefully we'll see a lot of people at the happy hour and trivia later this evening. So thanks, everyone. So
thank you.
Bye. Thank you.